What's up? Back at the kitchen table for another episode in the saga that is Making the Beat, called Stronger by Kanye West. Let's review where we were after part 2. We've come up with 4 parts here. We got a snare, we got a kick, we got a synth, and we got a bass. And here's what it sounds like. I need you right now. Okay, what we're going to concentrate on this part of the tutorial is how we can take these sort of basic sounds and tweak them, especially the drums, to get them to sound a little less anemic, a little less weak. All right? So let's start with the snare drum. And in order to do that, let's go back and listen to the original Kanye sample and just concentrate for a second on what that snare sounds like in there. Okay, and now let's listen to our snare. Now, the main difference really is that the snare in the Kanye sample has what we call a reverb on it, and that's just basically like a cave-like kind of echo that's happening. And that's what's giving that snare that kind of big sound. Like, our snare sounds like we're taking a piece of celery and going, just breaking it. Their celery sounds like they're doing that in the bat cave, so it goes. So we want to put that kind of cave feeling on top of our snare. And to do that, we're going to put a reverb on it. And here comes the reverb. In order to do that, I'm going to click on one of these slots underneath the expand here, and I'm going to put a multi-channel plugin. This time I'm going to put a reverb, and I'm choosing the plugin called Deverb. Okay? So it pops up. Let's go through what some of these sliders do. The input here is just the volume coming out of the effect. I always set this all the way to 0. The mix is how much of the echo you hear versus how much of the dry sound you hear. So for example, right now, if we play this snare with the mix set all the way to the left to 0%, we're just going to hear the dry, unaffected snare. So there's that celery stick snapping. Now watch what happens if I put it all the way to 100%. Now I hear just these like echoes of celery snapping. Oops, what's up, Pro Tools? What you trying to do? All right, let's try that again. We hear the echo of that celery snapping. Yeah. So I want it usually to be somewhere in about the 50% range. Something like that, okay? For decay time, that seems pretty good, 4.5 seconds, okay? Now, the next thing that we're going to do is put an EQ on the snare. And remember, EQs are what we use to boost or cut certain parts of the frequency. All right, so let's pull the deverb down to make room for it, because I want to do this EQ before the reverb kicks in. And I'm going to put a multi-channel plug-in EQ, and I'm going to put in an EQ 4-band. Okay, let's take a look at this puppy. The numbers that we're looking at along the bottom here are frequency. And so we have 20 hertz, 50 hertz, 100 hertz, 500 hertz, so forth. And then this line across the middle represents the relative volume of just that frequency. So if we want to boost a certain part of the frequency, say the area around 500, I can grab one of these colored dots, I can pull over, and I can push it up. And I'm boosting the frequencies just around 500 hertz. Okay? So we can do this with a sound, and if we move this back and forth, we're going to see how this changes the effect of our snare, the sound of our snare. Okay? Now, what I want to do in this case is give it a boost right around, like, I don't know, 400 hertz. And what that's going to do is give the snare like some punch into your chest. All right, sound people have some really weird ways of talking about sounds. Low frequencies, really low frequencies, hit you in your gut. Mid frequencies, like a snare, should hit you in your chest. We're talking about like where you're going to feel the sound physically, like if you're listening to a band really like tear it out on stage, right? Hi-hat, you're going to feel in your neck and your face. You even talk about hearing noises or feeling noises on the roof of your mouth and your sinuses. It gets a little crazy. But with snares, we usually want them to, boom, kind of hit you in the chest. So I'm giving this thing a boost right around, maybe 300 hertz, something like that. And if I lift this knob right here that's called Q, then I can actually make this a smaller region of frequencies that's getting boosted. And that's usually what I like to do. Okay? Okay, so that gives us more of that kind of big echoey snare that they've got. Okay. Now, the other thing in the snare that you might notice, take a look at the level of this snare. It's pretty low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my expand, and I'm going to turn the level up until I see that snare getting pretty close to into the yellow and maybe even into the orange. So I'm going to play it again. I'm just going to lift the level. And I put it up all the way. I can also boost this level right here on the slider to get even a little bit more. Okay, now I've really got kind of a bigger, fat-sounding snare. Okay, let's hear how that sounds in our mix. And we're not hearing anything because this is soloed. That was a brilliant move on my part. That's going to be edited out of the real tutorial, don't worry. Cool, okay, let me show you one more trick you can do, all right? I can control some things about the sound of the snare itself. And the way that I can do that is see how the snare is on slot A here. If I come up and select A next to these smart knobs, these are so-called smart knobs. They control various aspects of the sound. And one thing I can do, for example, is I can raise the pitch of this snare. Like, let's listen to it. Let me do it with just the snare soloed so you can really hear it. Okay, and I think that somewhere around there sounds pretty good to me, okay? So that gives you an idea of some of the stuff you can do. Let's move on to the kick. What can we do to kind of make the kick sound a little bit fatter, a little bit kind of heavier? Because again, to compare, let's listen to our original kick in the Kanye tune. And let's listen to our kick by itself. Yeah, okay. Ours sounds a little bit like you're kind of hitting on the lid of a dryer down in your mom's basement, maybe. So what can we do to make that thing a little bit boomier, a little bit heavier? Okay, let me show you a couple things. First of all, going back to my MIDI editor window and making sure that we have the gray light on for the kick and just the kick. One thing I can do is, these are all of my kick notes right here. Remember that every one of these notes is a different kick. And I can actually double up the kick so that each kick is actually two kicks at once. And the way that I can do that is having these selected, right? Right now they're not selected, and I can use the little box to select them. I can hold down Option, and I can drag these down to another note, right? And what I'm trying to do here is kind of get different kicks that kind of complement each other, that contribute something to the overall sound. So let's see what this is going to sound like. All right, already sounds better than when they weren't there. I'm going to delete these so you can hear the difference, right? What does it sound like without them? Now here's with them. All right, that already is sounding like a lot bigger, okay, and boomier. All right, a couple other things that we can do. I can give a little bit of kind of like a tribal drumming effect by using a delay here. And let me show you how we're going to do this. A delay, remember, is a plug-in that puts echo on a sound, but not that kind of Batcave echo, but the kind of echo that get when you sing like next to a cliff and you hear like hello, 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 hello. specific echoes that happen at a definite time interval. That's delay. Let's put one on there. Multi-channel plugin. Delay. And we're going to use the extra long delay, or actually I guess we could use the long delay. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick the long delay here. All right, this thing looks big and scary, but it's not really that big and scary. Here's the only things that we need to do. First of all, we're going to move the feedback up on both of these channels. The left side is the left channel, the right side is the right channel, because this is stereo. We're going to move the feedback up to about 30%. The feedback is going to control how long the echoes keep happening. All right, the next thing we're going to do is change the mix on each side to about 30% also. The mix is going to control how much of the echo we hear versus how much of the original sound we hear. We don't want to hear too much of the echo, so we're going to pull it down, maybe even a little bit lower, 28%, something like that. Okay? Then finally, these notes down here determine how often the echo happens. We can get the echo to happen in time with Pro Tools Tempo, which is cool, right? So we can select 30-second notes, 16th notes, 16th notes, 8th notes, quarter notes, half notes, etc. For this, we're going to want to select 8th notes on both of them, I believe. Let's listen to it and see, okay? How does this sound now? Okay, let's bring the mix down a little bit. And let's bring down the feedback a little bit. Okay, that's going to give it that kind of like someone's drumming with a couple mallets sort of feel. I kind of like that. Let's turn it off so we can hear what the difference is again. Here's without it. And here it is in context with the rest of the stuff. Okay, cool. You can just ignore that. So that's a delay. Now another thing that we can put on there is an EQ on the kick that's going to make it a little bit bassier, that's going to give it a little more oomph in your gut. So to do that, we are going to put another EQ on here, multi-channel, plug-in, EQ, and let's do the EQ4. Okay, so I'm going to give a boost over here to the low end, and I'm going to do it around 75 hertz. So I'm putting my little red dot in between the 50 and the 100, and I'm moving it up about to this +6 line right here, okay? So let's hear what that sounds like. I'm going to solo the kick. That really gives it a lot of boom, okay? Now I can see actually, however, I am now going into the red. See how those red lights are coming on? So I want to drop my output a little bit until I'm not triggering those red lights anymore. That's pretty close. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay? All right, so that takes care of my snare and my kick. Let's hear that whole thing in context. And that's definitely pulling it closer towards the original feeling, okay? All right, a couple more sound things that I can show you, and then that's going to do it for this part of our cover. Let's talk about how we can change some of the sounds like in this synth and bass here. Every time that we use an expand and we have a sound on it, that expand has some knobs that can control aspects of that sound, change it up, make it sound a little bit different. Now this sound, the basic fuzzy pad, I love the basic fuzzy pad, is on slot A. And so if I click up here on A by the smart knobs, these knobs across the top here are going to control the sound of that synth. Now, to my ear, this synth right now is a little too kind of buzzy. I'd like to mellow it out a little bit, take some of that buzz off of it. So let's solo this, and I can reduce that buzz by pulling down the resonance. So I'm at this knob right here, resonance. Check it out. I can do it even more by dropping the cutoff a little bit. okay? And that gives it a much more sort of mellow feel that's, I think, closer to what I was hearing inside of the original Kanye cover. I feel like suddenly I'm incapable of speaking. I don't know where that's coming from. It's after 6 o'clock at night. That's probably what it is. I'm just kind of done for the day, you know? But we're going to keep going, fight the good fight. So you might want to just play around with these knobs and just see what each one does and start to get an idea for what some of these terms might mean according to how the sound has changed when you adjust it. Okay? Let's do the same thing for the bass. I'm going to click on the expand next to the bass, and let's solo that so we can hear it by itself. And one of the things that I don't like about this bass is that little kind of boingy rubber sound right at the beginning of each note. That byong. I don't really like that. So I'm going to pull down the cutoff here. And I can maybe pull out the envelope depth too. There we go. Okay, so there's still a little bit of a note start, but now because I've dropped the volume by doing that, I can lift my level here to get myself back up, and I get a nice kind of warm, sort of buzzy feel. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the way that we can shape some of the sounds. That's going to do it for this part of our tutorial. What's going to happen in the fourth part of the tutorial? Well, first we're going to bring in the Daft Punk sample, and we're going to get that, the whole stronger, faster, that robotic thing going on. We're going to bring that in, we're going to lock that up, and then I'm going to remind you how to do a little recording so we can do our Kanye imitation and do the "I need you right now" part. Okay? Right on. You can go on to part 4.